Hey guys, Rich Lopez with the Droptine Traditions episode 122. My guest this evening is Mr. Bob Bruno. Hi, Bob. How are you?
Good. How are you guys?
Good, good, good. Thanks for coming on. Um, Before I begin, Bob, I just want to recognize the show supporters. That would be Traps Feather Rests, Daryl Dameron, Traditional Bowhunter Magazine, Sauk Trail Archery, StickbowSupplies.com, Whiskey City Trad Gear, WCTrad.com, Jesse Savage Blacksmith.com, traditionaljunk.com, St. Joe River Bow Company, theethicalpredator.com, and lastly stickbowhuntsmx.com. So Bob, if you wouldn't mind, just give us a brief background, born and raised, etc.
Born 1969 in Waterbury, Connecticut. I still live in the general area. Lived there until I was basically until I met my soon-to-be wife or my wife, and moved one town south into Naugatuck, it's called, and been here ever since. Been married 28 years. Got two beautiful sons, and that's about it. Never left Connecticut.
And it's funny, I never heard of you or even met you until Facebook.
Yeah,
However, there's another collector that lives in New York State who also is named Robert Bruno.
is that
You know,
right?
yeah. And
Never
I don't
met.
know. He's an older guy. He was an older guy 30 years ago. So I don't know if he's still with us, but I would imagine if he's still around, he's probably in his 80s by now.
Hmm. I've known about you for a while. I've actually gotten some of your refinished bows over the years,
Oh, really?
years and years ago, and a very good friend of mine that got me addicted to all this mess. You might remember John Lucas.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yes.
he had done business with you. So through him, I knew about you. I knew about your finish that you used to sell when I first. I don't know if you still sell it. When I first got into making bows, so I've known about you for a while. But yeah, I pretty keep to myself pretty much, and you know enough around here to keep me busy. I
Well,
didn't
I
get out.
would I would imagine looking at the background there.
That's only one wall, and I've thinned out quite a bit. And every time I make a conscientious an effort to really thin down, some poor fellow will pass away, another fellow collector, and I end up. I don't want to sound like I don't want to do it. I enjoy doing it, but I'll end up liquidating their collection for their widow,
Mhm.
and of course, I end up in adopting a few in the process, either ones that didn't sell or ones that they left me.
Yeah, I've done that in the past too.
So I can never really seem to get rid of them all, but that's fine. I don't want to really get rid of them all. It's been such a big part of my adult life.
Sure.
Um,
Now, how'd you get into archery?
I got into it actually as an adult. Believe it or not, I had very little to no exposure to archery growing up. Couple times in gym class, Boy Scout camp, um, things like that. It wasn't big in movies and all of that, and so I really didn't. I wasn't exposed to it, so there's nobody really kind of got my interest going. I grew up in a hunting family. Some of my earliest memories are hunting with my father and mostly his family. My mother's family, there weren't very many hunters, and but they were all gun hunters. They were all hunters and gatherers. They went out to get meat for the freezer, and that was it. Didn't have a lot of extra income, and shotgun slugs were expensive, and buckshot or whatever we were using. And I think, early on as a kid, I just tagged along and dragged equipment. And then eventually they handed me a 12 gauge, of course, because, trial by fire, might as well learn the right way. And that was it. I didn't know anybody that bow hunted. I didn't even know bow hunting was a thing um, until, I started reading about it and seeing it on TV. But then I didn't know anybody that did it. So it was purely accidental in my early 20s how I got interested in it and taught myself. I still didn't know anybody at the time, didn't belong to any clubs or anything like that. And just kind of picked it up on my own about say about 35 years ago, 34 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when did the collecting bug hit?
Well, it didn't start off that way. So I mentioned John Lucas. He's pretty much solely responsible for getting me into this. I got into bow hunting. Like I said, I knew about it, thought about it, and I was always hunting, but it was usually just shotgun season, which is, mid-November here in Connecticut, state land. And then our muzzleloader season, and always enjoyed black powder, was in December, which was really kind of a waste. So, when I was out small game hunting or pheasant hunting in October, I'd always see a lot of deer. I always had a lot of encounters with deer, and they always seemed to be a little bit more relaxed and look like easier to kill in October than I would see them when all the Orange Army was in the woods. And so I decided one day, I said, you know what, I'm going to go buy a bow and try to extend my hunting season. That's really all it was. And I bought a compound bow, went to one of the big box stores, didn't know anything, didn't know anybody that shot. And of course, the person at the store wasn't very helpful. My only guide was, what do they call it? The Fred Bear books, the Archer's Bible. Was that what they were?
Yeah, right. I got a couple.
I had a few of those because I always liked to read about hunting. And of course, there was a lot of good information, general information in there. I just kind of used that as a guide. And I bought a bottom of the line Hoyt compound. And of course, those things are just easy to shoot. I mean, setting it up myself, not knowing what I'm doing, I was hitting a doorknob at 20 yards in 2 weeks. I was like, all right, this is pretty good. Now all I got to do is find some deer,
Right.
I went up. We got Wasp Archery here in Terryville, Connecticut, about 10, 12 miles away. And I try to support local businesses. I knew they were there, and you can go up there, walk in, they give you a tour of the factory, free broadheads and all of that. So I got set up with broadheads. Actually, he helped me out up there too a little bit with tuning broadheads, and went out for that first season. And I had some encounters with deer. I didn't really have any shots. I drew on a doe, drew at the wrong time, had to hold forever, held till I shook, had to let down, doe took off. So I didn't get a shot off that first year. And then in the summertime, from late spring to early fall, was all about bass fishing. And I didn't have a boat. I couldn't afford a boat. I just had a studio apartment in the city, and I made do with what I had. Always had cars, but I always had a canoe on top of my car. You put the foam blocks on, flip it upside down, tie it down to each bumper. I had my pole and my tackle in the car, and I was living in Waterbury. I worked for an electrical company in Waterbury, and we would pick up company vehicles and drive to the job. So sometimes I'd drive by a pond or a lake that looked good, and then I'd take my own vehicle the next day and go right, after work and fish till dark. And so anyways, I was big into fishing, and we had a little store a couple towns away. It was like a miniature Cabela's. They were Bass Pro. It was primarily fishing, but they had a little bit of everything. They had some archery in the corner. They had some hunting calls and lures over there, and some air rifles over there. And I pull up to get some fishing supplies, big sign in the window, going out of business, everything 50 to 70% off. Of course, it broke my heart for a second, but then I just ran in the store and started stocking up on fishing supplies. And I come around to the corner with the little archery section, and there hanging from the rafters was a Damon Howard Super Diablo, 50 pounds, and a Black Mamba, 60 pounds. And I couldn't afford either one of them, even at 70% off. But, of course, I walked out of the store with both of them. Took me a while to pay them off, but I brought them home because I had that I just shooting a compound for a year, and I kind of had the bug. And I figured shooting a recurve had to be just as easy as shooting a compound. Well, that's not the case, but I brought them home, and I sat on them for a while, and I didn't know really how to set them up. And so I think that was like 93, 94, whatever year Byron Ferguson put his book out, Become the Arrow. I think that was about then. And of course, I seen Byron on TV doing his trick shooting. And of course, he shot a longbow, but recurve longbow can't be that much of a difference, right? And he was an interesting character. So I bought his book and I read it. And it's a great book. It's a little book, but very nicely written, easy to understand. And I just kind of adapted most of his style and taught myself how to shoot those recurves. And it took me a couple of years to get confident with them. But as time went on, I found myself, when I come home and I had time to practice, I would grab the compound less and the recurve more. And it just seemed more natural. And I had more fun. It was more challenging. I always liked doing things the hard way. And eventually I just never shot the compound again. I put it away, collected dust, and years later I gave it to some kid that was just getting started, help him catch the bug. And that was it. And I was just hooked on that. And so I started shooting 3D tournaments and getting out and being exposed to other people and seeing that there was other folks out there shooting these bows still. And a club that I've been involved with for 28 years, I'm currently the president of the Algonquin Archers in Woodbury. I'd gone there for some 3D shoots, and there seemed to be a lot of recurve shooters there. And then I went to, I was a member of a gun club that I'm still a member of, a local club. And I went to one of their monthly meetings. And I just happened to, there was no assigned seating. I just sat down at a table where there was an open seat. And I'm sitting behind a guy, he's got his back to me because we had to turn our seats to face the head table. And he had a jacket on, all kinds of patches all over it, And he had some archery patches on there. So when I had a moment, I tapped him on the shoulder, introduced myself. And he had been a member of Algonquin Archers. He had just joined, and his whole family shot. And he invited me up to the club during member time, to shoot. And that was it. I just got hooked from there, joined the club, and then realized that there wasn't, besides me, there was only one other archer that was full-time trad in that whole club. There was a lot of guys shooting trad bows, and they'd shoot them at 3D shoots or field shoots or up at the club messing around. But when hunting season came around, I found out they all grabbed their compounds. And I thought it was kind of odd. And I was a little disappointed. When I seen this big old white-haired Lithuanian, always up there with a big target recurve bow. Big bows, big handles. He loved big bows. The bigger the better. And he was kind of a hard person to get to know at first. But once he warmed up to me and we started talking, and that was John Lucas, by the way. And we became very good friends. And I found out that he was a bowyer. And he was friends at the time with, I don't know if you know Hal Kaplinger.
No.
He also made bows up here in Connecticut. He now lives in Florida. They were doing things together, making bows. And I was like, really? Making bows? I had woodworking tools. Very handy. I've been in construction, in the building trades my whole life. And I was an electrician. And, I loved building things out of wood at home. It was a nice little hobby. I said, that sounds like something I could do. I'd be into that, and he talked to me more and more about it. And the more he talked about it, the more it kind of seemed like something that I could pull off. And then I would talk to Hal, and Hal he was making them and selling them pretty much full time the whole time I knew Hal. John never was comfortable making and selling bows. He's very paranoid about a bow breaking and hurting and getting sued. And he knew Sherinsky. I don't know if you know Sherinsky bows. He knew Sherinsky at the time. And Sherinsky, I guess, had gotten sued. From what I heard, that's secondhand information from a bow that hurt somebody. And John was real paranoid about that. And all the bows that he made, he never put his name on them for that reason. And because of that reason, he installed that into me. Probably the first 10, 12 years I made bows, they don't have my name on them either. And then I just I brushed that off as that's kind of silly. But the one thing he taught me, he was great at doing finishes, by the way, but he instilled in me that if I was going to do this, to make sure that I focus. Is that pump too loud?
I'm sorry?
Did you hear that pump running?
No.
Oh, okay, good. There's a water pump just kicked on.
Yeah, I've got the software that I'm using actually has a background noise diffuser. So if your dog barks, it'll never hear it.
No, I don't have a dog. That's a good. Anyways, so he instilled in me, I'm building a bow that wouldn't fail. Concentrate on your glue lines, your fade outs, your material preps, your lamination preps, and all of that. And so I got a good lesson on how to do that. And I can tell you, I've only had a couple of failures, and they've all been right off the form, like on my bench, never in anybody's hands. It was because of that. But I never did focus much on the finishes. That was always my weakness, was getting a good clean finish. I seemed to lose patience towards the end, but
Yeah.
he was him and his brother and his father had a sign business, and he was 25 years older than me, so he went back to the old days. Well, first he started out doing auto body, and he did auto body back in the day where you filled dents with lead. And
That's how I learned. Yep.
That's right. And he would do the pinstriping by hand with the sword brushes. I think I got the right.
Yeah.
And gold leaf paint and all this stuff. And I've seen examples of panel trucks, like a plumber's truck in town, where him and his father and his brother hand painted the murals. And unbelievable. It just blew my mind. And he used to use automotive clear on his bows because it was so durable and hard, but flexible. And he knew how to spray a bow. And from that, and the only thing, we never made a bow together, but he would just feed me information in person or over the phone, give me the confidence to dive in, and then talk to me every step of the way. Hey, I encountered this. What can I do? But we never built a bow together. The only thing we did together was finish bows. When he got me, he loved the vintage bows. As much as he built bows, he liked the old bows and learning from them and copying their limbs and figuring out all the little tricks that they did. And so he got me into buying them. And it was a great way to learn how to make bows by repairing and refinishing and restoring to some extent old bows. And then I got to learn from these old lawyers the things that they incorporate into their bows. And it just got me kind of hooked on the whole thing. So that's why, I never really considered myself a collector because I would just buy bows to play with them.
Right.
Like I can get them cheap. And when I really got into it and caught the bug, custom bows were reaching the $1,000 mark. And I had just gotten married. We started having kids. I didn't have any kind of money like that to play. But, I can build bows, and I can buy cheap old bows that were beat up, a lot of them out there, and make them serviceable. And use them and enjoy the sport that way. And I did. Now, John, he went nuts. He had a massive collection. And he had really rare pieces. He always looked for rare pieces. And, we would spray bows together. His father still lived in the same house they were raised in. They had a barn. And the barn is where the sign business started. Then they had moved to a brick and mortar store. But the barn was mostly empty. So we would plastic off the whole inside of the barn. We had a bench in the middle.
Yep.
We had our spray equipment up there. And anytime we had a bow to finish, even if it was his bow, he would invite me up just so I get the experience in. And we would just go in with garden sprayers and wet the entire barn down, get it soaking wet, dripping wet, and go in there and shoot the bow, spend all afternoon doing several coats and sanding in between coats. He was very meticulous. He used to go up to 2,000 grit wet paper. It's going back to your car days.
That's where I end at. 2,000 grit.
My patience gives out many, many grits before.
About 800,
Yeah, I'm like, now I'm down to like 400. I'm done. You want to put my bow under a under a magnifying glass, you're going to find some scratches in there. But I just want to make a bow that shoots good. It isn't going to fail, and it's going to do everything you need it to do. And that's what I do. So but that's, and then the rest of it really is a blur after that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's funny. Talking about finishes, I got a bow today in the mail from a buddy of mine, Kevin Barr. It's an old Schaefer silver tip, but it's the gray ghost he put out with Martin.
Yep.
So this is his bow fishing bow. When I opened the box, I was like, holy crap. This thing looks like it sat at the bottom of the Dead Sea.
Oh, really?
Oh my God. And I sent him a message today. I said, hey, I got the bow, but holy crap.
Is it all finish damage?
It's just old. It's just, it's been through a million carp tournaments, and it just needs to be redone, and it has a twisted limb. So,
All my first carp bow was a 50s. I'm going to guess. I don't know crap about bear bows. I never got into collecting them, but it's a late 50s Kodiak. long one, like a 64-inch.
Yeah.
And it was just a maple riser. It wasn't one of like the rare ones. And it was in a buddy's basement. He had overdrawn it. The guy had like a 31-inch draw or something. And I know he overdrew it. He broke it right through the handle. The back glass was the only thing holding it together. All the material was there. And I said, hey, what are you doing with that? He goes, oh, you want it? I said, sure, I'll take it. And I dished out the whole riser and just stacked in a bunch of maple and walnut laminates, just all these radius laminates, pressed them in, glued it back together, put a breast with a bolt, with a nylon covered bolt sticking out. And that was my first bow fishing bow. I still got it. And I'm not going to give it to anybody. But otherwise, all my bow fishing bows were just prototypes of mine that I knew I wasn't going to finish them because they had flaws in the clear glass or something about them didn't come out right. So I just slap a reel on them and throw them on the boat. But yeah, they take a beating on the boat. That's for damn sure. That's That's the business, bow fishing.
And this is going to be one of the few that I do in satin finish.
Yeah.
I think
John taught me about, he said high gloss finish is the most durable finish. It's the hardest finish, high gloss.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we sprayed everything in high gloss, but I never liked the shiny glow. So we would spray them all in high gloss, and then I just knock it down with, Scotch Brite and some wool lube, and to a nice satin. So I knew I had a good durable finish.
Yeah.
John liked to finish them out, but of course he was taking his sanding to the extreme, so he didn't have anything to hide. So I was to do a satin, you're going to hide some blemishes.
Yeah, with this one, I'm definitely going to seal it with a good high gloss, and then I hit it up. What I do is I crank up the air on my gun, drop down the product, and it just fogs it. So it looks like that spatter finish that the old Black Widows used to have.
Oh, yeah, with the little spots, the little spots in it, yeah.
A little texturing.
Is that how they did it?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was an additive to it.
No, not at all. You basically just, and you don't press down my spray gun. It's a fender gun. So you don't spray it out, hit the handle real quick. You kind of like spit it. So it's like, it's spitting the finish out.
Yeah, I never gave much thought to finishes. I just want to get something to protect the ball and get it out the door.
Yeah.
Killing animals.
And people know this about me. I painted my first car when I was 9. And it was Metal Flake Dune Buggy, lime green Metal Flake. And it was my dad's vehicle. And he says, you're going to paint this for me. And I said, all right, cool. And let me tell you what, that was difficult, but it came out great. And at 9 years old, after we finished it, he took me to Dairy Queen every Wednesday night for ice cream in the Dune Buggy. But so looking behind you, I see so much eye candy. What intrigues me is the bow that's right above the Caledonian. Giant riser. What is that?
This here.
Oh, I think I know what it is.
Well, you know what it is. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
So this is, I can verify, this is one of a kind Dickie Roberts.
Yeah, the Fireball.
Dickie Roberts always used maple and walnut. This was made for a friend of his, and his friend wanted a rosewood Fireball. And he bugged him. He said, and I got the emails. I believe it or not, I bought this on eBay, and nobody was going after it. I don't think anybody saw it.
Not many people know what it is.
Yeah, and but I knew what it was, but the rosewood threw me off. And the guy was emailing me and he told me he was friends with Dickie, and he had other Fireballs, but he wanted a rosewood one, and he kept bugging him, and he wouldn't do it. He goes, I don't use rosewood, it's too expensive. And he goes, finally, Dickie said to him, look, you get the rosewood, I'll make you the damn bow.
Exactly.
So he made him this bow.
And are the horns walnut? Or is it all rosewood?
No, this is all rosewood.
Wow.
And he put the grain going in different directions.
Okay.
But to me, it looks like it was all cut from the same piece. You got phenolic on the back, on the horns, and you do got, some maple accent stripes. But the stacks here, I don't know where I am in the thing, but the stacks here, you got your typical thing here. But I had other Fireballs at the time, and it shoots the same. It just looks a lot better, in my opinion.
Is it a stable shooter?
Oh, yeah. It's a great shooter. That's why it's still here. This is one of the bows that I pick up, and it just always shoots. And, none of these bows are forever. I'm not going to take them in my grave with me. So anybody out there listening that's eyeballing that checkerboard or any of the other ones, eventually I will cut them loose. So just
Yeah, I might send you a blank check.
but right now I'm emotionally attached to some of them. But yeah, this is a good one. But I'm a longbow guy. I don't know if you really.
I didn't know that. No, I did not know
No,
that.
I'm a longbow guy, and that's really all I built. I built some recurves, and but I have no passion to really shoot recurves. I shoot them because of my involvement with the club and the archery. The sport. I go out and I support other clubs. So I go to 3D shoots and indoor shoots. I don't typically like shooting paper indoors, but I go to support these businesses because they support the sport. We support each other, and that's how it should be. And these are the bows I take.
So I got a real quick question while we're talking about clubs. Back when you got into this stuff, do you remember an organization in Connecticut, I think of all places, either Connecticut or Massachusetts, called it's called the Society of Traditional Bowmen?
No, I thought you were going to say T-Bone, Traditional Bow Hunters in New England.
No, this was a short-lived organization. But do you know a guy named Tommy Phillips?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay, so Tommy got me introduced to this organization. I think it lasted maybe 2 or 3 years. They had newsletters with a classified section, and they had a couple of shoots. And they had guys like Fred Anderson, Al Reeder. And when Al Reeder was up there displaying his bows, I was with him, helping him.
Yeah.
During that process. But I think you probably came in a little later than after they dissolved.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, or it just didn't survive long enough for me to really catch wind.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt there. It just popped in my head, so I had to say something.
No, it's okay.
Now, of all these bows that you've got here, do you have one of your long bows to show us?
Yeah, I got a whole rack of them here. Instead of turning the phone, well, here's the 60-inch one. Actually, you know what? It'd be a better look if.
Reflex deflex?
Hang on a second. What happened to my phone flip? Camera flip. Oh, that's right. Yeah, they're reflex deflex. I don't know if you can see that. It's a pretty basic design, very traditional, except for the reflex deflex. And it's just it's a design that actually came to me. This is actually I'll give you a quick history back to John Lucas because I owe him for this design. When I started making bows, I started making long bows. I was always attracted to the longbow. It just felt natural to me, more so than a recurve. And I just that's what I always made. So I tinkered around with copying other people's bows, and then blending in a little bit of my own stuff with theirs, or just coming up with something original.
I like it.
Making a straight limb bow like a Howard Hill bow, or a bow with a little bit of reflex in the tips. And one thing John did when he was collecting is he always wanted more information. It wasn't enough to have a Boyer's bow. He wanted to know what went into the bow. And if that Boyer was still alive, he would find them and he would call them. You remember Gary Ostetler used to do them interviews?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. Instinctive archer, right?
Yeah. Rest in peace, Gary.
Oh, my Lord. I couldn't wait for that magazine to come just to see who he was interviewing. John would do the same thing. He would seek out these old Boyers. And, of course, he got me doing that, too. I'll tell you later if we got time. But he had gotten into, he'd come across some E. Bud Pearson recurve.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Oh, yeah, I am. Wasn't that a California Bowyer?
No, Cincinnati, Ohio.
Oh, okay.
And the bows, most people would walk right by them. It's like a late 50s style, small riser. It doesn't look like it does anything, right? To the average onlooker. But, boy, I haven't shot one that wasn't a shooter. That just made me.
He made a couple of weird bows too. I had a couple of weird handled bows with strange grips.
So John was getting them, and he was like, "Man, these things are shooters," and really thin tips, and home guard shaped limbs, and crazy curves. And E. Bud Pearson was contracted, or not contracted, but they were licensed to use the V-Core
Yes.
lamination system. One of the few companies that did. He came across a V-Core and he's like, I got to see if somebody's still around from this company. Well, sure as shit, he gets a hold of Charlie Pearson, the youngest of the sons. He's still living in Cincinnati, Ohio, the same house he grew up in. They become friends over the phone. Charlie invites him out to the house. It's a little one-level ranch outside of the main city of Cincinnati, and a two-car garage attached. The two-car garage was packed to the rafters and to the doors with everything that was left over when they closed up the bow shop, whatever year that was. Of course, John was in heaven. He just wanted to go in there, close the door, and lay down for forever. And Charlie was happy that somebody found him that was interested in this old stuff. And he would spend a weekend out there, a whole weekend, talking with the guy. And then Charlie would tell him to pack his truck, whatever you wanted, you take it, because you're going to make good use of it. And I'm just happy somebody's going to take it. So he made 2 or 3 trips out there. He'd come back with a truck full of stuff. One time he came back with all of the forms, both forms that they had left when they closed their doors, whatever models they had, right? I still have them. I actually, John had given them to me to hold on to because they took up so much room. I got a loft outside my shop, and I still got them. But in those forms were 2 forms, which by today's definition are R&D longbow. Of course, back in the 50s or 60s, they called them a semi-recurve.
Right.
If you called that a longbow, you were tarred, feathered, and run out of town.
Yeah.
If it didn't look like the bow Howard Hill shot, it wasn't no longbow, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, wow, that's a really cool looking shape. Well, by the way, it's this shape, this exact shape. So what I didn't have was any of his recipes. He said years prior, someone had come out and said they were affiliated with some archery Hall of Fame. I don't know the act, I don't know if he was feeding him a line or what, but the guy had walked away with a bunch of stuff for this Hall of Fame apparently, and what he took off with was all the index cards for all the recipes, for all the models, what went into the models. And of course, without those, I just have the shape of the bow. And I never came across that model of an E. Bud Pearson, that semi-recurve. I'm still looking to this day, even though I don't need it. I would still like to have one to see what they put in.
Well, sure. When I've built bows, I've taken to replicate them. I've actually taken a micrometer and calipers and started writing down measurements.
Well, I think we all do that. We all have journals, all bowyers, and that's how I can target a draw weight, based on what I've made in the past. And that's how you learn too. Yeah, I got to go back and read notes why I had problems or something. So I was just shooting in the dark. I said, well, I'm going to make a bow off this thing, and I'm just going to, throw some running tapers, laminations in there, and just take a stab at it. And I did, and I still got the first bow I made off it. And it came out really light and draw weight. But it was workable, and it took me years of experimenting with different combinations of things. And so I can tell you that it's a copy, shape-wise, of someone else's bow. An E. Bud Pearson bow, a very old bow that I've yet to find an example of. But the bow is mine because I'm sure I don't make it anything like they did. They had some marks on the form, fade-out marks, which were 16 inches. So I know the riser was 16 inches, fade-out to fade-out. And they had marks at the end that said end of lambs. And then lesser marks in about 3/4 of an inch from those. So that was the end of the limb tip and the string grooves, and it was a 64-inch bow. And that's all I know about the bows. And I've yet to find one. Mine, I always liked the 66-inch bow, and mine have a 24-inch riser. I never gave any credibility to short longbows, 60 inches or less. I never found one that shot worth a damn. And one day I was curious. I was thinking maybe I could make mine 60 and chop 6 inches off. How should I do it? Well, I'm just going to take it out of the riser. The limbs work fine the way they are. So I'll keep the limbs the same length and I'll just shrink the riser 6 inches. The first one off the Forum Rich, I tell you, it shot like a house on fire. Actually, it's not this one. It's the one before this. This is the second one I made. And all of a sudden, I was a big fan of 60-inch longbows. And because it shot, and it was mine. and I've made quite a few of them. I still trade back and forth with 60 and 66 come hunting season, and it's really just the mood I'm in. One doesn't shoot any better than the other, and that's where I'm at with that. And that's where my bows came from. He had another form, which I'll call a semi-recurve. It was more of a deflex. You ever see a longbow where like a forward handle?
Yeah.
Where the whole handle's forward of center of the bow.
It's called a reverse handle.
Reverse handle. Thank you. I knew that. I lost the word. And it was kind of like that. And I made two of them off of that, and they were okay. But I already had a winner, and I'm not a tinkerer. I get something that works, I'm going with it. So both of them bows became bow fishing bows. One of them's at the bottom of Lake Zor, actually, because I left it on the stern of the boat and forgot about it. And I hit a wave, and boat took off with a brand new AMC reel. But I still have the other one. So that's where my bows came from. But I'm primarily a longbow guy. So when guys like Bob Frank or Bernie or anybody contacts me and they're bouncing shooting problems they're having and setting up a recurve and tuning and bear shaft tuning, I keep reminding them that I'm coming from a longbow mindset.
Right.
When you ask me something, I'm going to try to help you. But I never really got into fine tuning recurves like that. So I'll help you if I can, but I don't really know a lot about that.
Well, you mentioned the name Bob Frankie.
Yeah.
Frank. So speaking of Mr. Bob there, the next couple of questions come from him because
no problem.
I told him, he gave me names of people I should interview, and your name came up. Yeah. So I said, then when I told him that you agreed to come on, he says, "Oh, I got a couple of questions." So we're going to go down that road now.
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. So Bob wants to know, why do we instinctively shoot some bows better than others?
He's asked me that question in one form or another before.
Yeah, I talk to him every week. It's what's great about Bob. His mind is nonstop archery.
He's very analytical and very detail orientated.
Yes,
the exact polar opposite. And I don't think if something is, it is, and I just enjoy it. If this bow shoots better than that bow, it just shoots better than that bow, and I don't think about it. Okay. Unless I think I have a problem with the bow.
That's a total honest question. I would answer the same way. I was like, okay, well, I'm shooting this bow because it shoots lights out. That's what I like.
And that's why there's a million different bows out there of all different designs, and everybody sold a bunch of them. Well, why is that? Because everybody thinks that something else is better than what you think, is good. And it's just, it's the way the bow fits you. It's not the bow. You can't blame the bow. If he's referencing like two particular bows, the bows are the same. They both shoot well. It's just you may shoot one better than the other for some reason. It may be the grip. It may just be the draw force curve, the amount of pounds it pulls. It might, I don't know if a lot of people don't check that like per inch all the way out and see what is the bow doing, on the way out and on the way down. What is it doing? That explains a lot, but I don't really look for explanations to that stuff because it just is what it is. I mean, sometimes I could take a bow that I made that usually I shoot it like an extension of my body. It's perfect every time. Yeah. And one day I can go out and all my arrows flutter. Every one of them flutters. I haven't changed anything. And that stuff used to dwell on me, and then I stopped because that's the kind of crap that leads to like target panic. Just don't dwell on it. Sometimes I go out and it might be a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It might be during hunting season. And I just let it go. I keep everything the same. And then one day I go out and it's fixed. I don't have an explanation for that. I don't want an explanation for that. It must be something I'm doing.
Well, you can see behind me, I've got a bunch of bows. Yeah. And then in the two other bedrooms behind that closed door are my grandkids' rooms. They're loaded with bows too. But of all of these bows, there is one that I can pick up any day of the week and shoot lights out without even thinking.
Is that a P2?
No, it's a bear takedown with aftermarket bear limbs. And
somebody else made them.
Yeah, they're not. They're oh God, I forgot the name, but I take it out there. It's just like an extension of my body, but they're target weight. They're like 37 pounds.
Yeah.
But if I wish I had a set of these, well, I did buy a set. Oh, shit. Hold on one second. I'm gonna go get it.
Yeah.
All right. Now that it's in my lap, this bow, it's that LES riser they came out with years ago, but it's got the heck of these limbs.
Now, is that LES risers? That go back
These,
to
yeah,
heyday?
no, this is I ordered this bow from Bear Archery. It was a limited edition from 2017, and the riser is kind of screwed up. It's got a big glue void right here where my
Yeah.
fingertip is. So they made me another one that's flawless and unshot, and it came with limbs, the whole 9 yards, custom case. It was like $1,700.
Oh,
So they sold me the riser for $400. So that's my 3D bow. So
yeah.
the limbs are RER. Do you remember that
Yeah.
company?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
These things got a super hook on them.
Yeah.
It's the fastest 37 pounds I've ever shot in my life, and as smooth as butter.
Now, that
Well,
riser with the brackets, that's not an old design, Bear design?
oh, that's the only Bear design from Bear. With has the gunshot. I mean, the shotgun latch type
Yeah.
thing.
When did that come out? When did Bear introduce it?
1969,
Oh, 69. Okay. So,
and it's probably the best takedown system I've ever shot.
yeah.
I've got takedowns like the P2s with the
Yeah.
bolts and all that, and I love them. They're fun shooters. But I bought a set of these RER limbs in hunting weight.
Yeah.
And man, did they stack. Oh, I mean, I'm a 27-inch draw. I'm not a big guy. I'm not a tall guy with long arms and all that. So as soon as I came to 24 inches, it was like hitting a wall.
Yeah.
I was like, holy crap, 48 pounds and I'm hitting, this is not good. So my hunting weight bows are Bear archery limbs and they're smooth. The newer ones are smooth.
Yeah. A lot of guys at the club had those RER bows for a while.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know Bill Terry. He had those.
Oh, yep.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't. I never got in any of those trends because I made my own, and I'm content with my long bows. But I watch what everybody else shoots, and of course I get to try them. But never bought into any of that. I just got my first ILF bow last year.
That's another thing I want to play with. I don't own one, never owned one, but I'm intrigued by the concept.
Well, I'll tell you what. I got a big shoot, ASA 3D. Their championship is this month, and I'd really love to shoot this Barney here. This is my favorite George Barney bow. It's Royal Story. But I got a win that I bought from a guy at the club. Real good price. And I'm playing with that. And them bows are fast. Carbon limbs. At 72 inches, 45 pounds, but I can hold it all day. And shooting about 8.5 grains, I think, per pound. And it's still up there about 220. I mean, it's unbelievable, those bows.
So when you shoot, are you a point-on shooter or gap shooter?
No, I'm not a gap shooter. I'm and I never really liked the word instinctive archery because it's a misnomer. It's not really an instinct. We're all aiming. I'm doing this subconsciously.
Right.
My brain sees the gap and through repetition knows, I have to focus on that bullseye and not take my focus off that bullseye. And my brain will tell my hands what to do 99% of the time. But it's still aiming. I just don't do it consciously, directly. I never could. I've tried it. It's too big of a gap shooting split finger that I don't know how anybody does it. I mean, 20 yards, you're aiming at the hoof of a deer to hit it behind the shoulder. That just don't. I can't wrap my head around that. It drives me
Right.
nuts.
And I watch a lot of these guys with these 3 fingers under. I'm like, all you're doing is string walking.
I love like I said, I basically learned how to shoot from Byron Ferguson's book, Become the Arrow. And that whole concept of picking that spot and that arrow rising up and coming down and hitting that spot, the romance and the beauty, tranquility of that arrow in flight and hitting your spot. That's what he talks about. And that just got into my head. And I got to look down that arrow. I just got to see that thing go. And I got to imagine its flight before it takes flight. but it's difficult to be consistent in that game. It really is.
Now, do you know Jason Dulac?
I know him from
Facebook? Yeah.
basically.
He
Yeah.
said to say hello. He sends his regards. He's excited about this because now since I started doing these videos, it's always cool to bring out eye candy, and
Yeah.
that's people just love that stuff. I mean, look at that.
I can't get back far enough. Anything else you want to see? I mean,
Yeah, what's below the Bernie bow?
which Bernie bow? They're all Bernie
The
bows.
blonde, yeah. What is that?
That's the Royal Black Ace, the old four-limb bud hit.
Oh yeah,
Royal Black Ace, and I got two of these because my buddy John, I got mine first, and John got his, and they're only 5 numbers apart, the serial numbers, which is pretty cool. Both made in 1971, and we had a lot of hits, him and I, over the years. I had a lot of Black Aces. I always loved them. I sold my last one pretty recently, actually.
Did you know that I interviewed him and his wife?
Yeah, I know. I heard that. I didn't see the interview, but I actually got to call him and know him. And I bought his DVDs when he first made them. He did his DVDs on how he makes bows down in Florida. And I got to talk to him about this bow. He's a funny guy. And I asked him, and I told him, I said, listen, I had one of them at the time. John was still alive. And I said, hey, I got this Royal Black Ace, and my buddy's got one. I said, listen, they shoot great, but I don't think they shoot any different than a Black Ace. I said, what's the deal with the little limbs on the back? He goes, oh, that was just a sales pitch. They don't really do anything. I was like, really? I said, because that's what I thought, but I didn't want to insult you. He goes, oh no. He goes, I just put that on because it looked cool and people wanted them and they paid more money. It's like, yeah.
I love his honesty. Yeah.
That's awesome. On both of these bows, we never got the original. He told me it was a nylon, like a half a ball that sat under here.
Mm-hmm.
But what I did is I put felt pads like you would put on the bottom of a chair leg.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a little nail holding on. There's a little hole in the back. And really quieted us down having this back here. I don't even think it adds. I mean, it must add a few pounds of draw weight because when you pull back,
I would think it would add some resistance.
It's sliding up about 1.5 inches up the main limb.
Mm-hmm.
But it looks really cool. And if I bring this to an indoor shoot, you'd think I had 3 heads. People walk up to me and, that's really, I like showing off these bows as I bring them to an indoor shoot and let the kids see what a real bow looks like, let them know that they're out there. Both of these bows have an incurable twist, but it's a slight twist. It's very shootable. It's nothing I've given up trying to fix, both of them. It doesn't bother me, but if I ever went to sell them, I'd have to say that. And I know some people are bothered by that, but believe it or not, you can shoot bows just fine with a little bit of twist.
Like I showed you that bear takedown with the RER limbs, that has an ever so slight twist to it.
Yep.
So all I do is just bump the limb before I shoot it, and it's fine.
Yep. I've actually probably would sell both of those. Somebody willing to pay for them. I don't really. There's not a lot of guys like us out there that appreciate the value of these bows anymore. I don't think. I haven't seen it.
Is that a Sanders bow down below it?
Yeah, you just sold one of those, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I bought that because it was cool as hell.
Yeah, it's exactly the same bow I sold.
It is. I told you that. I think when you listed it. Not a great shooter, but they're very awesome.
I found all the Sanders bows to be kind of doggy.
Yeah, the Sanders Classic, when it was long and sleek, that thing had like a 38-inch riser or something. I thought it was decent. They were decent bows. I knew very little history about that company. I could never find anything on that company.
Yeah, Lake Champlain, New York. That's it.
Yeah, that's about all I knew. But I just got that for the cool factor. And I thought maybe someday I'd take the limbs off it and put my own recurve limbs on it and see if make some kind of Frankenstein bow. I did that. The very first George Burney bow I got my hands on came from England. And it was an eBay bow. And crappiest pictures you ever want to see. It looked like the person was hiding something. So I asked a million questions. It was a woman selling it. And she wouldn't give me any answers. She wouldn't tell me anything. She wouldn't send me any more pictures. Shipping was still fairly reasonable back then. Now it's not even worth it. overseas, and it didn't go for a lot of money. So I bought it, and I get it, and opened the box, and the one limb that she didn't show was delaminated, like 6 inches back.
Wow.
And I thought I had my first Bernie. I learned about Bernie through Gary Ostetler's articles, through John. John turned me on to Eddings bows, which were Bernie's designs. Mm-hmm. John, I'll give everybody a hot tip right now, like a hot stock tip. The Eddings Cadet 2, not the Cadet, totally different bow. The Cadet 2, Cadet and 2 slashes. That's the model. I don't care what draw weight you buy. I don't care when it was made. That will be one of the best shooting bows you ever shot in your life.
Yeah.
Bernie put something into those deep curves. Very unassuming. You know Eddings bows. They don't look like anything.
No, they're weird.
Late 50s hunting bow, run-of-the-mill bow.
Super cast.
We started seeing the genius of George Bernie there as a young man. And John had copied that bow. He copied the limb shape. And then he incorporated bamboo laminations, modern Gordon glass, smooth on epoxy. He built it with modern materials opposed to what George had at his disposal back then. And that was John's flagship target recurve bow that he made and sold. A friend of mine still has one of them with 2 sets of limbs. I have one back there. And the bow was incredibly fast and smooth. And I had some of those cadets over the years. So I started learning about George and his genius. And then I learned about the Textox bows and then the bows in Dallas, and seeing the oscillation cutouts, the vibration cutouts in the riser. Like, I got to get my hands on one of these. John,
well, did you hear about my recent story where I had 2 of those oscillation with the cutouts
down in Florida?
Yeah, and I walked away for about 20 minutes, came back, they were gone.
So your buddy Bob Frank has them.
No, he doesn't.
He said he just got his buddy saw 2 bows in Florida at a match.
Oh, so he's the culprit.
Oh, he didn't want to admit
Oh, you dirty dog. Okay.
He was all excited.
Bob Frank, you owe me beers, multiple beers for that.
Bob jumped on it, and fast. He had a buddy down there that
he's got spies here in Florida. This is not good.
Let me tell you, if I was there, I would have dropped whatever bow I had in my hand. And
dude, it was so bad. I had these guys bugging me to go shoot with them, so I was like, all right, I got to go shoot. Well, stupid. It was the stupidest thing I ever did. But whatever.
So I got that. I finally had my first Bernie bow coming, and it was a Royal Scott bow, and I get it, and it's delaminated, and I was heartbroken. But I thought about it for a while, and I said, well, I got this bow. Basically, I got the riser was in beautiful shape, and I got this beautiful riser. What am I going to do? Hang it on the wall for art? So I was like, who says you can't put new limbs on a one-piece bow? And that's just something I don't know anyone.
And it can be done. It just requires a little work.
Oh, my God. I put so much hours.
I should say a lot of work. Yeah, a lot of work.
Into the form. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to do it, and I did it. And I still got it. And, I made cuts. It's this one in the back. It don't look anything like when I got it. And wow. I made cuts here and here, at the end of the overlays. Made cuts and just peeled everything off and was very meticulous in not taking material off, but just sanding out my fade outs.
Right.
And then just built the form. Now I got a bow. I got a riser with the thumb rest, with the palm swell, with the knuckle grooves and the overlays. And I had to incorporate all of that profile into the form to go back down like this. And boy, it was so nerve-wracking getting the limbs lined up. One-piece bow, you got what you got when the glue sets, And boy, there it is. And of course, I have no idea, no point of reference for draw weight. But I was able to work it down to 50 pounds, which is fine. No problem. 69-inch, 50 pounds. And this thing shoots.
Oh, that's smooth as hell.
Oh, my God. This thing is so fast. It's unbelievable. And it's the only time I ever did that. And one interesting thing, I don't know why George did this, because normally for strength, you put your grain this way in a riser. And then you have your nice grain, your steeples as you contour. You got your nice, grain on the sides. Well, he did the grain this way. So when I took the laminations off, I had beautiful figure and steeples on the fade outs where you can't see them. And I just thought that was weird. I don't know why he went with the grain this way. And I probably the only one I've seen like that. I'm not sure why, but anyways, it was a fun project.
Mm-hmm.
It was a good learning experience. And I don't know anybody that's ever done it besides me, and I'm pretty proud of it.
Well, if you ever need to rehome it, you give me a call.
No problem. I almost got John. John had the sign business, so of course, as the sign business progressed, you get into vinyl lettering and all that stuff. So they had the printer for making vinyl lettering sign, and so he used to replicate old decals. So we were finishing bows, and we used to be able to put decals on. He never got around to making me a Royal Scotch decal. That would have been pretty cool.
Yeah, I got a hand letter half the stuff I do, and luckily I was good at forgery because I grew up in New Jersey, so forgery was a big deal. I used to sell counterfeit $20 bills when I was a teenager. I paid $6 for them from an Asian dude in New York City, and we used to buy beer with them. It was great.
We were closer to the same age. We probably could have been good friends.
So another Bob Frank question.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the George Burney again.
Yeah.
Do you by any chance know how he made the cross-section limb cores of Purple Heart and Maple?
Well, I'm not sure where you got that terminology from, but
the Caledonian.
It's not really a cross-section. So this guy, here's the checkerboard, what I call a checkerboard bow. This is a Caledonian 66.
Yeah, I've had one in my entire career.
Yeah, this is a Texas bow made in, I forget what town they were in Texas. This was after Eddings passed away in that plane crash, and George had to go find a new job. And he went from Iowa down to Texas and landed here, and which was a blessing in disguise because he was able to just do whatever he wanted to and let that mad genius ideas come out of his head and go right into his bows. But this is nothing more than a cutting board. How somebody would make a cutting board.
Sure.
A butcher block cutting board. He just laminated. I'm sure he had large pieces of stock.
And just
then just cutting out riser sections. What he needed. Now, the limbs are not checkerboard like this. The limbs are like an early action wood. Let's say action wood is thin strips of hardwood glued together. I call it plywood. It's basically what it is. But so in these limbs, he would go, they both start with Purple Heart. So he started with 2-inch stock, and it was just half-inch strips. So it'd be half-inch of Purple Heart, half-inch of Maple, half-inch of Purple Heart, half-inch of Maple.
Just glue it all together.
Yeah, so and I'm sure he made big blocks. I bandsaw my laminations off of big blocks and grind them down. I'm sure he did the same. And then as you taper the limbs down, of course, you end up with the steeples of different colors going down the sides. The tip overlays are just scrap pieces of the limb lamination. See Maple, Purple Heart, and then he altered underneath. If you can see that good.
I can. It looks great.
Same thing. A little different on the back. He's just stacking them on the back. The belly, same thing. Little stack palm sway. Always did these sharp cutouts on the bottom.
I love that.
Yeah, it's kind of unique. But there's no magic to it. It's literally just 2 hardwoods of different colors. The one thing I would drive me nuts, because I've done this, is I don't know how he sanded and wiped these down before finish without getting Purple Heart oil to bleed onto the maple and stain it.
And it does do that because I've had that happen. Yeah, and then I'm like, man.
My favorite handle wood in the longbows is Cocobolo. If I can find it.
Well, it bleeds like crazy.
Hard and heavy, and it bleeds like nuts.
Do you dumb down the Cocobolo with solvent before you seal it?
Yeah, well, everything, especially the cocoa, anything oily gets heavy doses of acetone on the surface. Before, that's like the last thing I do. All my components are laid out on the bench. I've got the cans of Spoon Down over here. I'm ready to go. The riser gets completely washed with acetone to get that oil away from the surface. I don't want it in the glue joint. Mm-hmm. It's going to come back up, but by the time it comes back up under heat, it's going to hit semi-cured epoxy and not go any further. and I've never had a problem with it.
So when I work on, let's say, Jack Howard Game Master, it's
Yeah,
phenolic with vermilion wood,
yeah, yep,
and then he's got the white fiberglass
yeah,
stripe in there. I get this bow super clean. As soon as I spray it, uh, I just see the vermilion just bleeds into the white.
Oh, really?
So I have to sit there and take a razor blade and scrape it. So I get all that blood out of there and
Yeah.
then hit it up with a brush. I chase it, but it gets done. It gets taken care of. But it's an amazing thing, a journey that we have, you and I, and all the other guys that make bows and play with bows. That it's a science. There's
Hmm.
a science to what we do.
Absolutely. There's a lot of thought put into it.
Yeah,
But I love the challenge of it.
absolutely. And that's the only reason why I keep doing it, because I love a challenge. I feel that there's my buddies from New Jersey, like, oh, Rich can fix it. Rich can do it. Okay, well, that's great to hear that. That's a great compliment. But when I got to sit there and bang my head off my workbench and like, oh my God, I need another cup of coffee. And I better make the extra strong pot, to
That's why
figure.
I never made bows for people.
No,
Every bow I've made for myself. It was something I wanted to make. And of course, I can't shoot them all. And sometimes they'd end up a little light or a little heavy. And somebody can always shoot them. And I would trade for them or give them
right.
away, sell them dirt cheap.
Right.
I
Yeah,
prefer I prefer to trade.
yeah, I like that too.
I had
I have the Jack Howard plan, so I want to try and make bows.
the Jack Howard what?
All his plans. I own all his
Oh,
blueprints.
you do?
Yeah.
I had one of his bows. John had a couple. I don't remember being, thinking they were anything great, but they could have been just the ones I had. I think we had hunting model ones. He had longer ones too.
Yeah, he always made 66 inches.
Yeah.
So the ones I want to make are going to be 62 inches.
Uh huh.
So the longer riser, shorter working limb, a bit of a speed demon. And he always put reverse tapers. I
Yeah.
don't know. What are your thoughts on reverse tapers in the limbs, in the tips area? Does it
Well,
help? Does it do anything?
when you mean a tip wedge?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it stiffens up the tip, but if you got a good design, like I've tried all that with my design that I settled on for the longbow, and I just found that the best shooting was just parallel laminations and let the shape do the work, and it works better than anything. Tip wedges you see a lot in recurves. People sometimes will use thin ones of phenolic, and I think they do that more to strengthen the
Sure.
tip than to add any kind of static to it. But it's a thing, and it works if you build it into the design. Like me, I was trying to incorporate it into a design. I didn't build a design around that. I didn't need a static tip. On a longbow, you want a nice smooth draw curve, anyways. So it didn't ever really work for me. But I've shot plenty of bows that had them that they worked. I don't question why it worked. I'm sure it helped to some degree.
So I'm going to give you the last Bob Frank question.
Yeah.
What method do you use to set up your knocking points?
Yeah. Does he mean just putting a knock on the string?
I think so.
Well, I hate to.
He wasn't specific about that, but I'm assuming that's what it was.
I don't know what he's looking for, but I literally just use a bow square.
Yeah,
I mean,
kind of like me. That's what I use.
Yeah, I start.
A Potawatomi bow square.
I knock under the knock. I shoot split finger. I knock under the knock, single knock, and I start 1/8 inch above center, which is what the bow square has on the mark on there, and that works 95% of the time. I know he's always tinkering around with bear shaft tuning and all of that, and I told him I've had very little success.
I have no patience for that.
Bear shaft tuning bows. I've had bows that can't shoot a bear shaft to save my life, but I put a fletched arrow on it and it's a dart. So
Right. I've been building arrows since 1974. Okay.
Yeah.
So when I get a bow, I kind of look at my arrow collection and say, okay, this will probably shoot good out of that. And I have a tried and true formula. It's 3 feathers, 3 helical fletch, and I shoot 47 pounds, so I'm shooting a 2016.
I will say most of my longbows, they do okay above 1/8 inch. For whatever reason, I have a 3/8 positive tiller.
Okay.
on my limbs. I don't know if that plays into it, but they usually work right around eighth inch. And any little variance you have in there, your
Sure.
fletching should be able to compensate for that and get you spinning true.
Yeah.
But there are some bows. There are bows that I have struggled with the knocking point on, some recurves that.
Yeah, there's a few that I've had to raise the knock point just to get some flight out of it.
But then a lot of times you take a bow like that and it's just really make a wholesale change to your arrow spine, and that may fix it because it just may not like that arrow.
Right. So I'm shooting. I have two ASLs here that
Yeah.
my hunting partner made for me. I love shooting them. They're fun, but they hate anything but cedar arrows.
Yeah. Well, cedar arrows or wood arrows in general are very forgiving.
Yeah, they are.
But for hunt, and I always hunted with them for that reason. But they're high maintenance.
Yeah, they are.
You have to keep an eye on them. And I've had instances where extreme temperature changes have really messed up.
Well, I live in the land of extreme temperatures.
Yeah, Florida. Yeah. So I find as I get older and I got other hobbies besides archery, I'm very busy and I always seem to be rushed during hunting season. So I've gotten into carbons for hunting simply because I don't have to worry about them. And I can just throw them in the truck. I can go and they're consistent. I just don't have the time to properly take care of wood arrows. I have hundreds of wood arrows. I still make them and I shoot them all the time. It just seems like, I go out hunting and I'm going out to kill deer and gather meat and come home.
Yeah.
I don't really want to do too much thinking out there.
I hear you. Yeah, exactly. So I'm a huge fan, as you know, of the 65-66 Wing Presentation 2 Takedown.
Yeah.
Rosewood risers. I just love them. They're just beautiful.
Yeah.
So in your opinion, was the Presentation 1, the one piece, a better bow?
In my opinion, but it's a very biased opinion because I like one-piece bows.
Right.
And there was a sleeker, more gradual curve on those bows. The whole bow was very sleek and slim, so it feels more like shooting a longbow. It was a bow that you could shoot off the shelf a lot better, than you could a P2. Now, that being said, everybody said P2s are great. P2s are great. You got to get one. So I'm like, all right. So I went and got one. And I'm like,
flip rest.
I'm like, all right, it's pretty good. I'm like, but it ain't that fast. You said they were fast. Oh, you got the wrong limbs. You got to get the black limbs. I'm like, well, you didn't tell me that. And your riser, you got to get the shorter riser. And if you put the shorter riser with the longer limbs or the black limbs on the longer riser, I'm like,
well, unfortunately, the rosewood handles were just one length riser.
But it was like the same reason I never got into bears. There's so many different models and combinations. Like, I don't even know what to buy. So I just left that to you bear guys. You guys can have them. I'm going to focus on something else. But, I've shot all the P2s I've shot good.
Mm-hmm.
But I know John had a bunch, and he used to take the Carroll's limbs and put them on.
Yeah.
The risers, and there's combinations that are lights out, and I'm like, I don't.
It's not a hard limb to make.
Within a hobby, and I just didn't want to get into all of that. And then the next thing you know, I got 12 P2s and Carrolls that, I don't need.
Right. That's another thing. I want to do a podcast, just myself, talking about the history of the P2 and the Carroll's bows and how that came to be. That's a lot of research.
It is, yeah. And there's a lot there. And like John, he got into golden research, the golden eagle bow.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. There's 5,000 combinations of things. And there's another company that's compatible with those. And
there's a guy, Don Poppy.
Yep.
Well, I'm not letting the cat out of the bag, but he's experimenting with reintroducing that bow.
Is that right? Yeah.
And that's all I'm going to say about that.
I didn't like them bows because they're the metal risers. I was never a metal riser kind of guy. I like wood. I just like that, the feel.
Yeah, I'm a wood guy, so I love the beauty of an exotic rosewood and the grain and the figure. Metal risers, they're very what's the word I'm looking for? Sterile. Very they have no personality, but the personality comes in when you shoot them.
Yeah.
But no, anyway. So I know you like other things. You got a great eye for detail and beauty. I noticed you like lever action rifles.
Well, I do cowboy action shooting.
Okay.
You know what that is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Well,
Talk to us about that.
I got into that about 10 years ago because I love, I went to one of the matches and I'm like, you guys are shooting all the guns I own. All I need is some leather and I'm in this game, and I mean, it's as much fun as you can have with firearms without the cops getting involved. And it's just a blast. And there's a saying in the sport, you come for the shooting, but you stay for the people. And that never really sank in until I started traveling to state level and regional level matches
Mhm.
and really starting to meet people. And then because, limited funds, I picked up for the first time in my life a cheap camper, a small camper to tow behind. So because part of the fun of these matches, these big cowboy matches, is they're 3-day matches, sometimes 4-day matches, and we take over an entire sportsman's club. And usually we turn the trap fields into an RV park, and so probably a good quarter of the participants have RVs and campers and tents and whatever, and they stay right there on the property. You never leave the property for the whole weekend. And of course, you have bonfires and potluck dinners later. And
I love that.
And so the real fun and camaraderie is afterwards, after all the shooting's done, the guns are put away and cleaned. And I found that crowd, it's a mostly aggregate age is a little bit older than me. It's an older crowd, and it's just like the trad crowd. They're just all down to earth people that are very nice and open to new people, and they're very friendly.
Yeah.
And so that just got me hooked on the game because it's just, and I've never given up archery.
I love firearms.
Practice almost every day, but the cowboy action shooting, it's competitive. I'm competitive. I love to be competitive, and I love to take things to the limit. And so I'm into the competitiveness of it. You're shooting on the clock, you're shooting steel targets. There's a lot of movement and novelty shots and poppers, flyers, and things going every which direction.
That's awesome.
It's a freaking blast, man. It's an absolute blast.
And what's funny is I'm the complete polar opposite. I am not a competitive individual at all, except at work. At work.
Well, the thing is, I'm competitive, but I'm really just competitive for my own entertainment.
Okay.
I'm not like trying to destroy you.
Yeah. No, there's some guys that are like that. They're weird.
No,
man. I can't hang out with those people.
No, well, you know what? It's like, I've shot the worlds, the IBO worlds.
Oh yeah.
That's a whole different ball game. But I want to experience things. And
is that held at the same venue every year, or does it move around?
It used to switch, but then they were running out of venues. They always have to have them at a ski resort because of the amount of people, and it's natural. You could just set ranges on the whatever you call them in skiing. Downhill, the course.
Sure. Just like ski Denton, like everything.
You had the gondola. You started on top. You shot your way down. You picked up the gondola and went back up to your hotel, and all the vendors and stuff are up top. And right. And we hosted IBO shoots at our club. So I want to support the organizations that support the sport and support us. So I went and did them. But totally different. There's some nice guys in the trad classes, but a lot of them are. Well, I don't have anything nice to say, so I won't say anything at all. But it's not a real friendly atmosphere. Very competitive. People are very uptight. It wasn't like a great shooting experience, but it was an experience. But so I'm not competitive in that sense, just with myself.
That's cool.
And
I saw the pictures. That's why I was intrigued by it, because I love firearms, and I saw some lever action guns in your photo dump there, and I was like, man, those are beautiful.
Well, the thing is, they're all tricked out. So they're modern. Uberti pretty much owns the cowboy action shooting game, and they've really up their productions. They make reproduction of all the original guns of the Old West, but they're 100 times better. The modern manufacturing processes and materials, but they're all race ready guns on the inside. They look old on the outside, but they're all slicked up on the inside.
Yeah.
And one cool thing, cowboy, you have to pick an alias.
Right.
You don't use your real name in cowboy action shooting. In fact, there's a lot of people that go many, many years without knowing most people's names, real names. Facebook kind of gives that away a lot.
Yeah.
But if it wasn't for Facebook, I wouldn't know the real names of most of the cowboys I shoot with all the time.
Okay.
But we call each other by our aliases all the time.
I might start using an alias on Facebook.
Can you see? This is my shooting cart behind me. Can you see my alias right now?
Yeah, I can.
What is it?
Bowbender.
That's a play on archery. My name's Bob Bruno. I just dropped the letter, and I figured my name would be Bo in the Old West if it was Bob. It was Bob's, but So that's a little play on archery to my alias. And,
I love it. I love the little. Is that like burned in the wood?
Well, a friend of mine who's a great. He's a primitive archer, not a traditional archer. Primitive skills guy.
Yeah.
Flint napping, self bows, master. I never feel comfortable me calling him that, but he is. Guy was great, and he's been sick the last few years, some sort of arthritis or something, and he's pretty much at home most of the time, so he keeps himself busy. He still naps heads and knives and jewelry and recaning chairs. He started wood burning. I saw samples of what he did. This was my profile picture on Facebook that somebody snapped at me at
I see that.
a rifle, and he saw it and he goes, "I got to burn that." I said, "Well, hold on. You're going to burn it. I'm going to give you dimensions of what to put it on so I could put it on my gun cart." And he did. And that's what he did. And everybody loves that. And when they ask me about it, I tell them about him and I steer them towards his Facebook page. I said, "Hey, if you can support the guy, he makes knives, antler handle."
Well, do me a favor. Send me the link to his page.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, I brought him all my shed. I have hardly any antlers left in his basement. I had piles of sheds and small racks.
I got him everywhere.
All of him to just turn into things, man. Just have at it. Have fun,
That's cool.
That's awesome. But that's where that came from. Yeah, the cowboy thing, it's really been consuming. I'm way into that lately.
That's good.
But I still do the archery and I still hunt, and but that I'm kind of in cruise control with the archery, other than it's taking time away. I'm not able to make bows, but I don't have anybody asking me for bows, and I've got enough of mine to shoot. So
yeah, I'm my own worst enemy when I'm left to myself. So archery keeps me in check.
Archery is my vacation. I take like 15-minute vacations. I go out in the yard and shoot.
That's why I'm not retired, dude. I work for a major insurance company, but I work in my man cave. So when I get a little tedious with the work, I said, screw this. I'll just put myself in away mode, go pick up a bow, go out and shoot for 10 minutes, come back to work I go.
Yeah, for me, I've always been in construction. I'm, commercial, industrial, electrician, new construction. Yeah. So my whole world during the day is concrete and steel and noise and heavy equipment and people yelling and losing their minds. And
so it's funny when I bought this house here in Florida, I walk into the garage because that was going to be my shop.
Yeah.
And I hit this light switch, 2 40-watt bulbs in the entire. I said, "No, we're not doing this." And then the outside shed was huge. You could put 2 Mini Coopers in it. I said, "That's going to be my spray booth." So I immediately hired an electrician contractor. I said, "I want enough light that Stevie Wonder could see in here." He put LED lighting in everything and ran all the electric to my shed. I mean, it's blinding out there.
LEDs are nice. They're bright, but when I'm working on a bow, sanding it down, I go outside in the sunlight. Sunlight, nothing shows blemishes like sunlight does.
I do the same thing.
And you can't. I have access to every kind of lighting you can think of, and some you can't think of, and there's nothing that imitates sunlight.
So I sprayed a bow on Sunday. No, Saturday and Sunday. I've been spraying all weekend. So I go into the spray booth today to get the bow, and there's a goddamn lizard sitting on the bow. Thank God the finish hardened enough where it didn't leave footprints.
Where is it, out in your garage shop?
My spray booth is in the backyard. It's a separate entity.
Oh.
The actual shop where all the dirt, the dust goes down, that's in the garage.
Yeah, I built a spray booth here, very, very small, and they got my plywood box, my bow oven in the middle of it, and I got 2 brackets on the lid. So when I finish a bow, I close the lid, and I used to hang the bows vertical and shoot them.
Yeah.
Now I lay them across these brackets that have a very sharp edge on top, so it's a very minimal contact on the bow limb. and I shoot. But John, just the way he did it is he didn't see any point in putting excess finish on the glass because the glass was already hard, So say I start with a belly or face down, the back gets coated and each side gets coated. Sets up, flip it, the face gets coated, the sides get coated. So the sides always have twice as much finish as the face. And so that way it's sitting in the brackets, doesn't leave a mark.
That's the same thing I do is I seal my riser completely, and then I will spray the last 3 coats, limbs, and that way I don't want to see crazing or any kind of stress going on in the clear coat.
Right.
Of that. So, man, this is great. We're having this conversation. We're already almost an hour and a half in.
Really?
Yeah. See, I'm an easy guy to talk to. I mean, my wife says I could talk to the dead.
We might have to make this a mini series.
We could do that. I like having recurring visits.
Yeah, it's fun. I don't mind talking. This is fun. So,
what's in store for you for the rest of 25 into 26 as far as bows are concerned? You going to make any more bows or?
No, I have no desire to make one right now. I think I've been done buying them for a while. I think the only thing, I know the only bow that I would buy if one came about was a King of Scott.
Okay.
Because I don't have a King of Scott. I almost had a King of Scott. Bernie Trace just came across one. And I think he was going to offer it to me if I wanted it. Of course, they had to do that whole international shipping fiasco, but it turned out that it was pretty badly molested by someone. They took a file to the site window and it was this and that. He got his shooting, I think, but it wasn't good enough for me. If it was here in the States, I probably would have went for it. But to go through all that with the shipping and hope it gets here in one piece after paying several $100s to ship it, I didn't want to go through that. So they're pretty rare model. Never seen one. I've never seen one in person, and I don't know how many are here in the States even exist. But I don't know, someday. But that would probably be the only bow I would buy right now. I've pretty much burned out on trying different bows and buying them. I still need to shed some, get rid of some. But
I hear you. I'm the same way. I've been selling off some my collection slowly because I'm in probably the last quarter of my life, and I want to spend it hunting. I want to really spend it having fun with friends, and that's what I'm doing.
That's a good plan. Yeah.
Yeah. My wife goes, I don't want to leave her with all this stuff. And
that's the thing that I witnessed twice with John, and then before that, this other gentleman, and really with the other gentleman, this guy, he was a longbow guy, and he had at least one of every major longbow manufacturer there was from like the late 80s to 2000. Like, all the who's who of bow making back then, all the hot bows, the hottest and latest and greatest and all of that. And I fought like hell to get half of what I thought they were worth for each one. I bought the whole lot from the widow. I laid them all out on her back porch, and I gave her a fair price for it. And I got my money back, and that was about it. I got my money back, and I kept 3 of the bows. They were John Strunk.
John. That's another guy I want to get on here.
Yeah. Oh, there's a knowledgeable guy about making bows.
These West Coast guys are tough because Pacific time, Eastern time. I want to get a guy on here that's a bowyer in Australia. That's a 19-hour time difference.
Really?
Yeah. Where he lives in Australia, he's like in the other side of the world. So I've got to call him at like 6 a.m. It's like the next day over there. It's weird.
Yeah. I met a guy, he found me online because I got all kinds of feelers out there on the web about Bernie bows. Anything pops up, I get, like somebody will contact me if they have a Bernie bow. And this guy contacted me, and he was in Australia. And he told me he used to work for Royal Scott Bows. He was there at the end when George moved back. And it's really. And so I bet he exchanged numbers, and, like you said, it was a big time difference. But I found time to call him, and we talked quite a few times. And he had a bow. It's right here.
Yeah, I was looking at that one.
This is a a Scots guard.
Mm-hmm.
Made he made it. If you were an employee, George would let you make a bow for yourself. So it don't have the Royal Scot decal, but it says the Scots guard, 50 pounds. It's a 58-inch bow, all rosewood, beautiful bow.
You
He
got the
sold me
knuckle grip. Yeah, it's beautiful.
I paid a fortune to get this out of Australia. And he gave me some good insight into the company and to George. And he was really the only person I ever talked to that knew George, that worked for him back then. Man, it was a shame. He was disappointed when the company closed up and eventually became whatever it became, King of Kelso and Border eventually or whatever. Bernie Trace knows the whole timeline better than I do.
Now, did you listen to my interview with Bernie?
Oh yeah, I caught that. I told you I was coming home from Thurmont, Maryland when you asked me about doing this, and I was at they call it the Mason-Dixon Stampede down in Thurmont, Maryland. It was a cowboy match, and man, it was hot as hell. It was 107-degree heat index, and I went back and cranked the AC, and I'm sitting there trying to cool off before jumping in the shower, and that alert came up. I had a weak signal, but I saw Bernie was on there. I said, holy shit, I'm just sitting here anyway. So I actually watched the whole video start to finish sitting in the camper, and it was very interesting. He's an interesting guy.
I really enjoyed that conversation.
I couldn't, man. I got that 30 squib stuck in my head.
Yes, I told my wife, but 30 quid. 30 quid is $41.
Quid?
Yeah, quid. And
Like,
she goes, are you kidding me? He's paying 30 quid, which is $41 for these bows, but you're spending $1,000 on a Black Widow H101.
Yeah.
Like,
That cracked me up, man.
I better move to Europe. I got to move to Europe.
I think you said we got to have T-shirts made to say that.
30 quid, bro.
I'll give you 30 quid for that bow.
That's funny.
I mean, that's amazing how many bows he's bought in a little bit of time.
Yeah, and he's on the low down low. I got 400, because his wife just came back from shopping. And like, my wife has known how many bows I have 24/7. She does not live in another world. She lives in my world.
Yeah. Well,
she goes, what'd you pay for that? How much did you make on this? She loves what I do because it makes me happy. And if I'm happy, she's happy.
Yeah, I never it never affected our family budget.
No.
And I was able to wheel and deal and
I don't ever go beyond what I can't go beyond. I don't want to, what's the word? I've never infiltrated our family influx of cash, if you will, to do a bow deal. If I got to wait, I'll wait.
Well, it's really, I'd say the primary driving force into why I started building bows, because I couldn't afford to try. I wanted to have a Robertson stick bow and a Jack long bow and this, but I couldn't drop a grand.
Yeah. 180 bucks, you could build a bow.
Well, back then, I always.
Well, back then, yeah.
From day one. So, I cut my own laminations and ground them. I did everything I could myself. I built my own surface sander. I had 3 generations of my father's family worked in GE plant up in Pittsfield, Mass. And I got a pile of hard rock maple from the early half of the 20th century that they used for packing and transformer windings. Big blocks of hard rock maple, and I made my own surface sander out of maple.
I love manufacturing stuff.
Yeah, and that served purpose until I got money to buy a modern one, and worked my way up. My tool collection got pretty sophisticated eventually.
Sure.
But you didn't really need tools. John did a lot. He loved doing stuff by hand. And
yeah, that's how I roll. I do everything by hand, and I watch people do stuff on bows, and they're using machines and stuff. I'm like, oh my god, I cringe. But hey, if you know what you're doing, knock yourself out.
Yeah, well, he was retired most of the time I knew him, and he had the time to do things like that. And working with my hands my whole life,
right?
They hurt. I can't go too long holding on to a Nickerson rasp. It just wears on me. If I can hog out a bulk of it with the oscillating drum sander or something and not go too far, then hell, I'm going that way. There's no pride.
Yeah, my thing is like this weekend I was wet sanding finishes. So I started with 800 wet, then I went to 1,000 grit, then I went to 1,500 grit, and ended with 2,000 grit. My freaking knuckles are killing me.
Yeah, I work with electricity. I appreciate and respect electric motors, so I'll utilize them any way I can.
Yeah.
You know. But,
So, Bob, I got to ask you, if you're gonna, this is a fun question. If you're going to take yourself back in time,
yeah,
where would it be and why?
back in time for a short trip or permanently?
Whatever you want. It's a open ended question.
You know, I never
Let's
have.
let's put it this way: archery related.
I mean, I'd love to go back to when George Burning was still alive and meet him and talk to him
Okay.
and pick his brain. If I was, probably 15 years older and I followed the natural progression on how I got into this, I probably would have gotten into this when he was still alive.
Mhm.
And if he invited me, I'd probably go live with him in Scotland for months and apprentice under him.
Well, actually, Europeans are known for that. They'll
Yeah,
come on out, hang out.
yeah, it's, I don't, I was so into his bows and reverse engineering them. I acquired a few delaminated ones. I was able to actually figure out some of his many secrets that he put into bows.
Sure.
And the guy, I'm telling you, is a genius. And it ain't just me.
Yeah.
His bows shoot like nobody else.
I've recognized that genius decades ago, and I was like, now I'm starting to get in the meat potatoes of him through my conversations with you, Bernie,
Yeah.
and other people that own these bows and have fondled them and studied them. And it's like, my God, he was such an amazing man.
He did, I never realized right away that he had concave limbs. The limbs aren't flat. They're concave across, and that's to add draw weight and reduce mass weight. It's like kinks. He does one kink. It's a gradual kink out here. Like Dickie, he shot Bud Hitt's bows in competitions.
So right, and Bud did the same thing.
Yeah, he basically learned how to make bows from Bud Hitt, and Bud did the same thing. He's got two kinks. Dickie's got two kinks. Bill Stort had way too many kinks and waves. That guy was nuts. And things like that are obvious, but going across the limb, if you put a credit card across, there's about a 32nd of an inch gap in the middle. And that's how he stiffened up the limb, added draw weight while reducing mass weight. And that was one of those little things. And I actually did that when I put the limbs on that other one, the laminated. That was hard to do. I did that with a router on the form. I don't know if it made a difference, but the guy put so many little hidden things in there like that. Double tapers. He'd run the tapers out to mid-limb. Then they'd level off for about 3 inches. They'd be parallel, and then they would static. They would run back up. And so at the tip, the lamination was the same thickness as it was at the fade-out.
That's awesome.
Would taper into each other and then level off, and that's how he drove the working part of the limb down to where he wanted it.
Jack Howard did that too.
Yeah, and that's what this guy that I met that gave me that sold me that Scots Guard that worked for Bernie. I tried to pick his brain, and it was everything I imagined, because I see pictures of Bernie at the drafting table all the time, and he was very camera shy. He thought he was homely. He didn't want to be photographed, and he just wanted to work on designs. And this guy said the same thing. And he thinks that was his downfall, because he never paid attention to the production floor, other than inspecting people's work and making sure that the bows are being built right. He never really paid attention to the shipping, the receiving, and paying the bills. And he was always having money problems. And it didn't make any sense to me, because the guy had a great bow. How did he not sell a million?
Right, but there are people that are geniuses that have no business sense.
But this guy said he very seldom came out of that office up on the mezzanine. He was at the drafting table, just throwing ideas out on paper and ripping and crumbling up paper and trying this and trying that. And I could see that in his bows. And boy, I wish I'd go back and talk to him. He just had to be like, savant.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
My brain is constantly going. I'll get up at 5 a.m. thinking about stuff, and I'll have to go to my shop and start doing something.
Yeah,
it's a thing. It's an illness. It's not an illness. It's just the way your brain is wired.
But it's funny collecting bows and picking up and seeing these other people's bows and seeing all of George's ideas incorporated in these bows, and people acting like either they're literally ignorant of George Burney and that this was done before, or they're just knowingly saying that they invented this. I see all those aspects. And compound bows, they didn't have cutouts and risers until the 80s, I think. They picked up on that whole oscillation damper thing and lightening up, the weight of the riser.
Oh, and it's a whole nother ball game now.
It's funny. I come across an old Howard Hill longbow, and I think that was another odd eBay find, and I don't know why. Anybody wasn't buying it, bidding on it. I picked it up pretty cheap. I'm not a big Howard Hill longbow fan. I never thought any of them really shot worth a damn. But this one was old. I could tell by the emerald green glass for starters, and it was woven glass. And
late 40s, early 50s.
No, well, so I get it. And there was nothing on there that could tell me what it was, or what era it was from. I know it wasn't a Craig Eakin bow or a Ted Kramer bow, because he put TK before the serial number for Ted Kramer. And so I said, well, hell, it might be a John Scholes. John and Tom Scholes had the business almost up until when Howard died. And so John was alive, and I talked to him in the past. I was real close to getting him to come out to the archery club to do his demonstration, because a lot of the trad guys would have loved that. And so I called him up, and I said, hey, I got this Howard Hill ball. I wonder if you can help me identify it. And he goes, describe it to me and give me a serial number. And I did. He goes, yeah. He goes, I made that bow in 1969, which is cool because that's the year I was born. And I said, I got to ask you a question, John. I said, you ever heard of George Burney? It's George Burney. Doesn't he make bows over in Europe or something? I said, yeah. Well, he was a Scotsman, but he made bows here in the States too. I said, he did something to his bows I never seen anybody else do. And I see it in your bow. The limbs are concave. I said, is that something that was typical of old Howard Hill bows? He goes, back to when Howard Hill made the bows himself, and they were all wood, all bamboo, and he would use like raw bamboo on the back. You had the natural concave shape of the bamboo. He would flatten out the back as best he could to get a good gluing surface. But the whole bow would take that little bit of a concave shape, like the back of a self bow, like an English longbow. And he said he thought of doing that to his bows because it would stiffen up the limbs and he could reduce the mass weight. And he said that's why he did it. And he never asked me why. I asked him if he ever heard of George Burney, and he never said that he got the idea from him, but I suspect he might have, and a lot of other bowyers might have as well, because nobody else was really doing that.
Every bowyer studies other bowyers' work.
And I can tell you something. I've got 5 Howard Hill bows. Again, they all kind of shoot pretty good. I'm a big Pacific U fan. That's what I use in all my bows, my long bows. And I got a Redman, which is all U.
Yeah, Pacific U is a very nice wood. It's just
I got a half
real smooth. Yep.
Half breeze, half bamboo, half U. Anyways, that bow there, that John Scholes Howard Hill longbow, does not shoot like any other Howard Hill ever made. Okay. So there's something to it. It's got same components and shape and dimensions of. I think it's a tembo. So it's they haven't changed the design of the tembo, but it shoots like no other tembo. So there's something to it. I can tell you that George Burney's bows are pure magic. I mean, pure magic. And I don't really understand why totally. I just know that he did a lot of innovative things and they worked. And I think his biggest hindrance was that he was born in a time where he didn't have access to the best materials. And of course, it was these guys using inferior materials that caused the progression of better materials.
Right.
The demand was there. But I know if I copy his bow using all modern materials, where I could put a fast flight string on one of George's bows, they're lights out.
Yeah.
And that it's great. I'm just happy I discovered him and learned his legacy. And I feel silly sometimes, as infatuated as I am with this man, but it's really just his brain. I don't even know if he was a particularly good shot with a bow, to be honest with you.
Right, but I think we are more intrigued with his thought process.
Yeah, he's just like, where did that come from? I mean, this is like something you just accidentally born with.
Yeah.
He might have ended up being an incredible engineer or a scientist if he went a different route in life.
Who knows what they did back then? I mean,
he used that brain power to put into bows. you
There
know.
are there are people that are born thinkers, and they're always deciphering and pulling things out of the woodwork.
Yeah,
But but hey, Bob, we are over an hour and 40 now, and I want to thank you for
yeah.
coming on. This has been a very exhilarating interview.
Did we
Um,
cover all the questions?
oh yeah, we did. We did. I avoided questions 15, 16, and 17 because we kind of got there.
Yeah.
Like I said, we will improvise, which I do. Everything's an improvisation. My whole life is an improvisation. Um, but how can people get a hold of you if they've got a Bernie bow or anything they want to talk to you about?
My email's been the same for 25 years. Bruno Bows, BrunoBows at Comcast.net. You do any search on archery in New England, Algonquin Archers is going to come up. My email's on that website, Facebook page, my phone number, cell phone has been the same for 30 years. And I'm out there. You can find me. I'm not hiding. Especially if you got a Bernie bow, I'll find you. I'll, um, but yeah, I don't get around it. I used to go to Denton Hill and all the rendezvous and stuff like that. I think the last time I was at Denton Hill was '96. Believe it or not,
Wow.
I got a pin on my quiver. I think it says '96, and I stopped going to them really because I'd go with John, and he was such a bow collecting fanatic. I couldn't afford to go with him. I mean, I just know I'd spend money I didn't have. I couldn't walk around those blanket swap meets
Yeah.
and not spend money.
Yeah, I was the same way. I haven't been in about 5 years.
That's where this checkerboard bow. Uh, John actually he saw this. He was down at Denton Hill just walking around, and his eyes locked in on this bow. The guy was just carrying it around, shooting it, and he was from the area. And of course, John he probably plowed over elderly women and little kids on his way, focused on that bow, to get over there, and struck up a conversation with this guy about the bow. And of course, the guy never even thought about selling it, but John had to have it. And I guess he made him an offer he couldn't refuse, and he got that bow. And I hounded him for it. He appreciated Bernie bows. He had some of these was his, and but he knew how much I loved him. I said, "You got to let me have that bow." He goes, "Oh, you can borrow it anytime you want," and I did. And I knew he was in a good home, so I stopped bugging him. But he left that to me. He actually willed that bow to me at the end of his life.
Wow, that's amazing.
Along with the other ones, his widow was all concerned. They had some difficult conversations at the end, and he knew he wasn't going to make it. And she was all like, "Well, John, what am I going to do with all this stuff?" I mean, his basement was packed with stuff. I said, "What am I going to do with it? What am I going to do with it?" And he goes, just call Bruno. He'll take care of it. He goes, "I can't put that burden on him. I mean, do I pay him?" And he goes, "Just give him the Bernie bows. He'll take care of it." So that was her message to me from him, that he said, "Just take the Bernie bows, especially that one." And I spent weeks selling off his stuff, and
Yep.
I mean, he had a lot of. So he was a welder by trade, master welder. He had all kinds of welding equipment that I got in contact with welders that loved old equipment, and schools. I gave some of it to trade schools. They had cabinets of welding sticks, rods, and stuff. And he was into fishing. He had handmade lures. He had file cabinets filled with antique lures, totally outside my expertise. But luckily, I found some friends that were into that, and they sold the stuff off for her and gave her good money for it.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
that was hard, and I hate doing that. I hope I never have to do it again.
I did it for Jack Howard's wife when he passed. She found me through a mutual friend and says, "Look, he's got 12 bows in the shop that are in various stages of completion.
Yeah.
Can you finish them?" And I did. And I sold them on eBay. I didn't take a dime from her. I just wanted my eBay fees taken care of. That was it.
It's great. It's great to do that. I love being able to do that, but it's also emotionally.
It's stressful.
Like with John's bows, man, we shared every adventure in getting every bow, and as I'm looking at each one, these memories are just flushing back. Dealing with Phil Cody and Fred Carty and
I remember Fred.
Yeah, and Stort.
Oh yeah, he The guy that, right.
George Johnstone.
Yeah, great guy.
All them guys, I knew them guys through John. I never really met any of them. Fred, he was very good friends with Fred Carty. He'd go up to his house in Vermont all the time and come back with some wild bow.
Yeah, I bought a lot of bows from Fred.
Yeah, well, I did too indirectly, because he had a lot. He dealt with a lot of bows, but I met a lot of interesting characters through John. So I was kind of, an observer to most of that more than an active collector, because I really couldn't afford it. And but I learned a lot, and I appreciate the time I spent with him. Good. And his friends, and the wonderful hobby and skills that he pushed me to learn and get into. It's been very rewarding. My boys, I got 2 sons, and they both had. Hang on, I got to show you. They've had custom longbows since they were 3 years old. This is a 36-inch bow that is 9 pounds at 18 9 pounds at 18 inches. It's basically 2 Bacote veneers under clear glass. Just the veneers and the 20 thousandths thick glass gave it that draw weight. This is 48 inches. Another one of my son Nick. This is 18 at 18 inches, 48 inches, Bacote, Cocobolo handles. And
how old are your boys now?
25 and 22.
Wow, that's awesome.
Hang on, I can. Where's the camera when you're on a call like this?
I don't know. Are you working on a laptop? The camera should be at the very top of the screen. The monitor.
iPad. I want to. Oh, I think I found it. Flip, record. I don't know if you got time.
Got nothing but time.
What the hell is he? I'm so computer illiterate. That's minimize, maximize. I have no idea.
I would leave it alone. Leave it alone.
I got pictures. The kids always had custom back quivers and custom bows. They were hot shit. But I'll tell you what, these bows, I use the formula that 21st Century made. 21st Century made a great longbow. You know, the old wing bow guys, Buddy Sampler and Jim Plone. They worked at Wing Archery, making wing bows forever. And they did 21st. In fact, that's the only brand new bow. My wife bought it for me as a Christmas present when we first got married. And it was made by Jim and Buddy before they handed the company over to Milton Callaway. And I still got it. I'm looking at it right now. And his formula was circles. So if it was a 66-inch bow, you took 3 66-inch circles and you mated them together, 1 this way and 2 this way. And that gave you the curve for their longbows. That's it. Buddy shared that. It's not a secret. He goes, that's what I do. So I did it with these. For the 48, I made 48-inch circles, 3 of them. The things are unbelievable.
That's great.
I could sit at Home Depot on the floor, picking out all the 1/4-inch wood dowels and finding good ones. And Three Rivers sold the 1/4-inch field points, the 1/4-inch knocks and all that. And those, I forget the weight of those things. They weren't very heavy. And boy, they shot. I mean, they shot. You can kill something, small game with these bows at the light draw weight. And they got to learn to shoot, the right way with good equipment. And I was actually making kids' bows for a while because nobody else was doing it, making a good quality kids' longbow. And I figured out a way to make them pretty cheap, where I used 2-inch stock. And because they were thin, I just ripped the bow off the form. I ripped it right down the middle with a bandsaw, and I had 2 sister bows, 2 identical bows. Each time I glued them up, and I would sell them in a box with a dozen wood arrows that I made. And I still have the letters. I sold them on eBay, and I have the letters from all the kids wrote me a handwritten letter back thanking me for the bow and how much they loved the bow.
That's awesome.
Labor of love. And I did that at the first house. And when we moved to this house, of course, I packed everything up and had to unpack and set up the new house. And I stopped making them at that point. It was just simply because of that event. I think I would have kept on making it because it was a lot of fun. And I was making them for my sons at the time. Of course, I wasn't making.
Now, are your sons still shooting?
No, they my oldest did. My oldest hunted. I don't know if you see that picture, but he took a couple of deer. He was small for his size. You got to wait till you're 12 in Connecticut. And at 12, he was small for his size. He wanted to hunt with a trad bow, but he just couldn't pull an ethical weight. So I took him up to my buddy's bow shop. He set him up with a little Matthews. It was made for kids, fully adjustable.
Right.
He was only shooting 35 pounds, which that still ain't legal, but nobody's out there measuring weight. I'm gonna tell you, he blew through 2 deer like they were made of paper.
Yeah.
It's all shot placement. And I set him up with 2-blade heads instead of like a traditional type of compound head.
Sure.
Just to get penetration. He smoked 2 deer that first year. I was more excited than he was, I think. And then, you get to high school and you discovered a 2-legged deer and you start chasing them around.
Yeah.
And my youngest was always into team sports. He was a big baseball player. He played baseball in college. So, no, he kind of faded away early and never really came back to it. But they have those roots. They've shot guns with me. And,
Sure.
you give them that base and they do with it what they want. But we see that a lot in archery in the club. A lot of guys, kids, they shoot and they're way into it. And then they start high school and they go to college maybe, or they start careers. And they don't come back to us until like around 30 years old when they're set. Kids are growing up and now they're looking for something to do outside the house.
Yeah.
And they come back. Very, very few kids stay with it. Right into adulthood. I mean, we got kids that are nationally ranked in the top 5 in the country shooting in our youth program at the club. And they're taking that shooting into college with them because they're going to shoot archery in college. And they're going to continue competing. They have aspirations of making the Olympic team.
Yeah. Of my 5 kids, 2 circled back to it.
Yeah.
And my middle stepson, actually Todd, and my grandson is a rabbit hunter. I mean, they just ate up with it. So it's great. I'm excited.
My oldest is starting to get back into it again, shooting. Anyway, he's going to come shoot some 3Ds with me, but it's fine. It's something I get to do. As I get older, I sure could use a hand moving deer around in the woods, but
yeah. What are you my age?
Well, I've adapted. I don't always hunt from a tree anymore, and I'm more selective of where I put animals down. I don't go deep into the woods anymore. I don't want it to ever be like a burden or seem like work. It's not that important to me. I always found it more enjoyable to just sit in a tree and melt away into nature for a day.
Yeah.
Like a little.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Vacation.
It's like being in church.
It took my wife a while to understand that. I'd come home when we first got married and she'd go, how'd you do hunting? I said, it was a phenomenal day. Oh, what'd you shoot? I didn't shoot anything, but I saw 3 bucks, about 15 doe. I had a hawk come down and grab a squirrel right in front of me. An owl almost hit me in the head right at sunrise, flying by the tree. Saw coyotes. It was a great day.
Right. We're seeing stuff that people will never ever see in their lifetime.
Yeah. And she'd be like, okay, I thought it was about killing deer. I said, well,
no.
I said, actually, for me, that was the part that I put the most thought into because that's when the fun stopped.
Yeah.
As soon as I let an arrow go, I'm like, now the work begins, you know, and where am I? How late in the day is it? Am I by myself? Do I have any help? And I guess all them thoughts run through your mind. That would ruin a lot of opportunities. I would just pass on deer because I'm like, you know what? I'm out here by myself and it's an hour before daylight and I got to work tomorrow. Screw it. I ain't shooting them, because I just didn't want to deal with the work.
I actually had a 170-pound doe broadside at maybe 30 yards during black powder. And I did not shoot her because I wanted to go home and watch the Green Bay Packer game. So.
Yeah. I mean, listen, that's the reality of it, and because we're in it for the right reasons, Yeah. I think, but.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Bob, I want to thank you again for coming on the podcast. We'll have to do this again and talk about bow making and get into some more physics, if you will.
Yeah.
But I want to thank you again. And as I sign off, I want to tell everybody, take care of each other, love each other, respect each other. Mental health is a big deal today. If you see something, say something, embrace that person and put them on the right path.
Amen.
But with that said, brother, we will talk again.
Take care, my friend.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
Good night.